There we go. YouTube was a little laggy this morning. Hello, everybody. I am glad to see everyone here. We are ending our child development series. Well, not really. We're going to do young adult development next week. But as far as children go, we're going to end that today. However, I think, as I mentioned in the other presentations that we've done, for a lot of the adults that we work with, they had chaotic childhoods and they may not have accomplished all these tasks, or they may still have issues, quote unquote, surrounding some of these tasks. So child development is not something that necessarily ever goes away. You know, we have to nurture that inner child. We have to help heal that inner child that may not have felt autonomous, that may not have felt like they were going to be lovable for who they were if they failed. So this is an issue that we definitely want to continue to consider as we work with adults. Was there something that they were taught, something that they heard, something that they learned when they were young that is still plaguing them today and keeping them from being able to trust themselves and others, keeping them from being able to make decisions or feel autonomous or feel lovable? Alrighty, so hello Heidi Rochelle, hello Adriana and Jim, hello Lisa, Katrina, good to see you again. Hello, Elako. Dawit, always good to see you. A lot of returners here. My guess is most of you have to have a certain number of live CEUs, but hey, that's okay. I'm always glad to see you, whatever the reason you are here. Hello, Jason. Good morning, Catherine. We will be getting started in about a minute, but again, as I was saying before, some of you came in, child development issues often plague a lot of the adults that we work with. So just because you don't work with kids doesn't mean this doesn't apply to you at all. We have to help them heal that inner child or support that inner child in developing trust, autonomy, initiative, independence, etc. Hello, Jay Holmes, Cheryl, Stephen Boyd. All righty, and we are almost there. We got to be close to the 11 o'clock. Oh, Maggie, that is so sweet. I appreciate that very much. Hello, Jenna. I'm not sure if I said hi to you. You may have scrolled right past me. Anyhow, hello to everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation on child development in the teen years, fostering identity and self-esteem. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Snipes. Today, we're going to review the developmental tasks children accomplish at this stage, examine how teens' thinking patterns are different than that of both preteens and adults. We'll explore ways to assist teens in enhancing their self-esteem and self-identity. And we're also going to throw in Kohlberg's theory of moral development. We have been talking about Piaget and Erikson. Now we're going to add, and Maslow, and now we're going to add Kohlberg to the mix. So let's just start off with Kohlberg. And I want you to think for level 2, conventional morality. So right at the beginning of those tween years, how might some of these things block identity development? This is the stage where young people are starting to try to figure out where they are, but you know, they're just emerging into this developmental stage. At level 2, according to Kohlberg, we tend to have internalized moral standards of valued adult role models. So children 9 to 11, 12, especially this early stage, are often believing what their parents tell them, what the media tells them, what they are gleaning from the community and from school. So their moral standards about right and wrong are coming from these different sources. If the family is guarding the child's exposure to certain types of media or certain types of social media, then that's going to impact what their thought processes are and what they're influenced by. Not saying that they should or shouldn't censor. What I'm just saying is we need to recognize if children are only seen or only provided with one point of view, then obviously that's the point of view they're going to adopt, especially if it seems to resonate with their caregivers and with the people that they value and spend time with. Now, this is an important first step. They're internalizing these values, which gives them a foundation. But later on, they're going to have to start sorting through those values and saying, is this something I believe? Is this important to me? And that's where we get throughout this teen stage where youth start developing their own identity. They may reject some values and embrace other values. At this point, authority is internalized, but still not really questioned. So what I believe, what I teach my children, is often taken by the child at face value as my mother would say, as gospel. And encouraging children to analyze what they think about certain issues. Do you believe this is right? Do you believe this is wrong? Is, in my opinion, really important from an early age. Now, not throwing them into the deep end with these really heavy questions, but as things come up in life with their siblings at school, what have you, talking about what do you think is the right thing to do? What do you think is fair? I remember one of the first activities or questions I had in this area for my kids was the Hans predicament. If you remember from Psychology 101, Hans's wife was very sick and there was medication that was available for her, but he couldn't afford it. So he was faced with two choices. He could either abide the law and let his wife die, or he could steal the medication and save her. What is the right thing to do? And I remember having a very animated discussion with my daughter was 9 about this time, and my son was 14, about, what do you believe? And there is not necessarily a right or a wrong to this. It's a moral judgment, and then backing it up with, why do you believe that? Why do you think that's the right solution over the other one? And making sure in the process, since there were two of them, and then me and my husband, of course, making sure that they felt accepted for their points of view. So we learned assertive communication. We learned evaluation of values, morals, principles. And I encouraged them to start thinking about some abstract topics, because obviously that wasn't something they were directly facing. We want to help them explore and discuss social problems as they get older. 9 is a little bit young to really be throwing a lot of social problems at them. But again, what's going on between them and their siblings? If they think it's not fair that their sibling gets to stay up until 9 o'clock and they've got to go to bed at 7, okay, so let's talk about fairness. What makes something fair and why might something need to happen? If they go into their sibling's closet or they're poking around and they read their sibling's diary, that's a breach of environmental boundaries. So we might want to talk about what boundaries are and why this might not be right to go in and read somebody's diary. And they may say, well, so-and-so did it. Okay. Does that make it right? And help teens learn to embrace acceptance of people and themselves, regardless of other viewpoints. How much of this could we all benefit from right now? Oh my gosh, if we had more of this, there would be a lot less vitriol in media and social media right now. But I digress. Embrace acceptance of people. You're lovable. You're a good person. We may disagree on this point, but that's okay. You're allowed to have different opinions. I'm allowed to have a different opinion. It doesn't mean you're a good or a bad. It doesn't mean that you are less of a good person. And that's one of those we really need to keep bringing back when somebody says something that you maybe vehemently disagree with. Okay, that's their perspective. That's their right. And does that make them any less lovable? As our children are starting to try to define their own identity, they're going to have attitudes, opinions, etc., that we may not agree with. Sometimes we may vehemently disagree with. However, we've got to figure out, how we can respect their boundaries. Obviously, making sure they're safe, etc. Reasoning in stage 3 is based on the norms of the peer group. So this is when we start getting into high school, maybe late middle school, high school. The peer group becomes much more important than the parent group. Most people who've raised children can tell you about this age, kids start thinking that we are dumb as a box of rocks. And they don't realize that we're not that stupid until they are 25. One of my kids is there. The other one is still on her way to recognizing that maybe mom and dad know something. But that's okay. That is their rebellion. That is their way of creating distance and saying, I don't have to agree with you. And we're like, yeah, you don't. We love you anyway. We may not agree with what you're doing, but we love you anyway. But in high school and again, late middle school, the child desires to be seen as a good person by others. But what do we remember from middle school and high school, aside from it was horrible? At least for me. I don't know about for you. Being seen as a good person equated to being liked, which equated to liking what other people liked and doing what other people did and not rocking the boat, at least in my experience. And a lot of times that's the way it is. What you do is equated with who you are. And as caregivers, we really need to help children separate that. Your friend group may want to go do this. You don't feel comfortable with that. That's okay. That doesn't mean you are any less lovable. That doesn't mean you're any less awesome. It just means you don't like doing that. And that's okay. Encouraging them to remember that and carry themselves tall when they disagree, and teaching them, helping them practice disagreeing assertively and compassionately. I hear that's something that you want to do, and more power to you, but that's not for me. Okay, I'm not judging you. I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying, no, not for me. I'm going to draw my line in the sand there. And then stage 4 is maintaining the social order. Interestingly enough, research has indicated that only about 15% of adults actually reach this stage. That's kind of heartbreaking. Where there's an awareness of the wider rules of society and judgments concern upholding the law and avoiding guilt. I can't talk today. We don't want to feel guilty. None of us wants to feel guilty. Most of us want to uphold the law. However, there's also a social order out there that is governed by things other than maybe what we'll call the political laws, and it's governed by moral laws. What is the right thing to do? In the wider rules of society, you see somebody fall down and hurt themselves. The wider rules of society says the right thing to do is to go up and try to help them. That's the right thing to do. Now, there are some circumstances where you might think, hey, this is a setup. It's not safe for me to do this. Obviously, there are, caveats to everything. But in this stage, we really want to try to create a functioning, compassionate society. According to Piaget, children are moving into formal operational. So their abstract thinking and hypothesizing begin, which again, you've got Kohlberg saying you need to think about what is the right thing to do in this situation. And a lot of times that means abstracting from basic principles. I know that this is the right thing to do in this situation. Therefore, maybe in this other situation, that might be the right thing to do. Or what are the options? Thinking back to Hans, his wife is really sick. He's devastated. What options does he have? He can steal the meds or he can let her die. Those were the only two options that were given. There's probably other things that we could do now, but for simplicity, he was brainstorming. What are the options? And this is a great time to start teaching youth to brainstorm. What are the other explanations? And we're going to talk about this a lot when we get to cognitive distortions. What are other explanations for why that might have happened besides they hate you? You didn't get invited to Susie's party, and it feels like the complete end of the world, and you are thinking Susie must hate you. All right, well, that's one option. But what are some other explanations for why you may not have been invited to the party? And brainstorming those. One of the options could be you were invited and you missed the invitation. Who knows? Or she thought she invited you and she didn't. I don't know what the possibilities are. But that's where you start brainstorming with the child and saying, okay, that's one way of thinking about what happened. What are some other possible explanations? Inductive reasoning. My experiences lead me to predict. My experiences with trying to hang out with this group of people lead me to predict it's not going to go well if I try to sit at their table at lunch. My experiences with dogs lead me to predict that if I go hang out with that dog, it's going to be a good thing. Deductive reasoning is based on a general principle. In general, dogs are good, and I can expect them to be nice. So in general, this is not based on my experiences that have been added together. This is based on a general principle. Teens begin to think more about moral, philosophical, ethical, social, and political issues that are requiring theoretical and abstract reasoning. And there is a book called Moral Questions in the Classroom. I don't know if you can read that one of my teachers used back in the day when I was assisting in teaching different classes. And it can be helpful. You can also come up with your own questions. You can encourage students to hypothesize moral questions. Maybe you're teaching social studies and you're in a section about World War II or some of the other issues that you study in social studies. I'm trying not to get in trouble with YouTube by using the wrong words. But you can ask people, let's talk about what the moral implications are of this. Let's talk about what other options there were besides the one that this person took. During this stage, biological needs are changing. Children, youth, teens, whatever we're calling them, are growing at a really rapid rate. Why is this important? Because if youth are stressed physically, then they are going to have more difficulty learning. They're going to have more difficulty with all that executive functioning, the abstract thinking, concentration, attention, problem solving, organizing, planning. All that stuff is going to be impaired if they're sleep deprived, if they're malnourished, if their blood sugar is all over the place, if their circadian rhythms are out of whack, if they are vitamin D deficient, in pain, not getting enough exercise and oxygenation, and not aware of their hormone changes. Now, I'm sorry, there's not a lot we can do to address the hormone changes except for have compassion with youth. But remember, at this stage, 24 years old is where they believe that our brain really kind of finally, quote, finishes developing. It hardens off at that point. Not that we can't learn new things, but it becomes, a lot of the stuff that we have learned becomes more ingrained at that point. During this period, oh my gosh, not only is the brain still pretty darn malleable, the youth is still struggling to learn distress tolerance skills. The hormone changes can make them feel more irritable and can make them feel more sensitive. You know, we all remember how we felt when we were in high school sometimes. And that can cause extra stress, which can cause them to have even more hormone changes and mood changes. It can cause them to withdraw. We know it has distinct effects on not only academic, but also social learning. So we do want to make sure as caregivers that we are providing a foundation for a healthy body that can support a healthy mind and a healthy life. We want to make sure that they feel safe from emotional abuse, physical assaults, bullying. Now, we can't protect them from everything, but we can be there to support them. We can encourage them not to engage in it themselves, and we can help them through these processes because unfortunately it happens. And encouraging them to figure out how they're going to deal with toxic people is going to be important. Encouraging them to learn how to keep themselves safe physically is also going to be important. You know, all those safety things that we take for granted now, like being alert when you're walking from your car to your house or from the parking garage to your car, wherever you're walking, having situational awareness is so important. I see a lot of teens these days just totally into their phones, and older people too, as they're walking. They are clueless as to what's going on around them. They are literally a walking target. As caregivers, it's important for us to help them recognize how to keep themselves safe so they don't have traumatic experiences which undermine their ability to feel safe and empowered in their environment. We also want to educate them about drugs and alcohol. We know they're going to be exposed to them. It's just a fact of life. We know they're going to be exposed. So this is where we start talking about it. Being safe doesn't mean being completely shielded and, protected from these things, because they're there. They're going to be exposed at school, at parties, at bonfires. It's going to be there. So talking with them, helping educate them about what drugs and alcohol are, what drugs and alcohol do, why it's likely a poor choice, even with alcohol, to engage in drinking alcohol at a young age, how it impacts their brain, but also how it could impact their future life if they want to go into the military or if they want to be a lawyer or something else that requires a background clearance. If they have arrest records, then it might be problematic. They also need love, belonging, and self-esteem. And these are higher level issues on Maslow's hierarchy. Love, feeling like somebody cares about you, feeling like you're lovable, that there's a reason for your existence. Belonging, feeling like there are people who accept you and love you for who you are, even if you don't get it right all the time. Self-esteem is feeling okay about who you are. I feel okay and I accept myself for who I am. But that also means having to know who I am, having to have some sort of identity. If I believe that I am only loved and I'm only belong if I conform to the identity of what you want me to be, that is not healthy. That's not helpful. And it will eventually erode a person's self-esteem because I don't know who I am. Bandura referred to this as reciprocal determinism, where all of these things, people's environment, what they do, what they say, and their personal factors, including their beliefs, impact what they do, what they say, and their personal factors. It's a bidirectional interaction. If I don't feel loved, then I'm probably not going to go out and try to figure out what my identity is. I'm probably not going to be motivated to do that. Or if I don't feel like I know who I am, then I may struggle with my self-esteem because I'm like, well, what do I stand for? Children have already gone through a lot of stages up until now, and they build on each other. You have trust and mistrust, and then you have autonomy versus shame and doubt. So the child, when they develop autonomy, they develop this sense of capability. I can do things. I'm going to make mistakes, but I can do things. Initiative was the next stage we talked about, where the child started developing a little bit more of a sense of independence. It's like, hey, I can take initiative and do things by myself. It doesn't mean everybody's going to abandon me. It doesn't mean that I have to do everything by myself, but I can take initiative and it's okay. And it's actually kind of fun. Industry is the next stage where people start developing a sense of competence. Not only can I do things by myself, but a lot of times when I do, I succeed. I don't always succeed, but a lot of times when I try things, I succeed. So I feel competent, which supports my desire to try to do new things, to be more independent, to take initiatives. Identity versus role confusion is this 12 to 18 year stage. And I know we started talking about 9-ish. Unfortunately, youth are developing and maturing a lot faster now. So I think there's a lot of overlap in that middle school area on some of the things that they're dealing with. During the identity versus role confusion stage, youth are searching for a sense of personal identity through exploration of their personal values. So they're sorting through all those values that they've taken in over the years, and they're trying to figure out, do I agree with this? Well, my friends at school say that's not right, but my parents say it is right. So what's right? And youth are having to start trying to make decisions for themselves. They're exploring their beliefs and goals relating to many roles. Do they want to be a parent? Do they want to be in a committed relationship? Do they want to work 40 hours a week? Or do they want to do something else? And at this stage, they're also learning to accept others, even those with ideological differences. And we already talked about that some in Kohlberg's moral development. We need to be able to accept people for who they are, even if their beliefs differ. If you are, I've shared many times that I have one very good friend who's an atheist, and I'm not. That doesn't mean we can't be friends. It sometimes means we have differences of opinion on things, but all right, they have their right to their opinion, and I have my right to mine. And we don't belabor those things because we know that I'm not going to try to convince them to change their mind, and they respect me enough to not try to change my mind. We can state our point and move on. Social influences are huge during this period, as we all well remember. We need to recognize the influences we have on ourselves. It's not just other people's influences on us. It's the influence we have on ourselves, what we tell ourselves, what we believe about ourselves. We need to listen to what youth are telling themselves. Are they telling themselves they're stupid or incapable? Or are they telling themselves that they're awesome and, they're going to fail sometimes, but that doesn't mean they're a failure as a person? Two completely different points of view. We need to help youth recognize how they influence others. How do I influence other people in my environment? Am I aggressive? Am I overbearing? Am I a doormat? Do I have a positive effect or a negative effect on them? And likewise, looking at how others impact me. The people that I'm spending time with, do I agree with them? What do I enjoy that they do? And you may not love everything everybody does, and that's okay. Understanding that we all have varied interests, and you may enjoy doing some things with a person, but not others, and that's okay. We want to focus at this point on what I call pubertal self-help. There's a lot of social influences about physical changes and peer pressures to look a certain way or act a certain way or dress a certain way. And helping youth, again, step back and figure out what is it that they feel comfortable doing, and helping them understand the changes that happen with puberty. And yeah, sometimes you're going to have zits on your face, and it's unfortunate, but everybody gets them. Encouraging them to talk with their friends about how are you dealing with this? Because again, the peer group has a lot more status at this point. So if you believe that they have a healthy peer group, then get them to involve their peer group and get support from their peer group. We can help them by providing protection against turmoil in their social support groups, in their peer groups. There's going to be drama. There always is. So, and that's true in any peer group. Helping them figure out how to navigate that turmoil is really important. In terms of identity formation, we want to be a mirror for them. We want to reflect back to them who they are. And that can help them figure out, is this something that I want to embrace or not? If they ran into somebody that was just like them, would they want to spend time with that person? We can be a sounding board for values clarification, using a lot of Socratic questioning. Instead of telling them what we believe the right thing is, encouraging them to, what do you think the right answer is? Tell me why you think that is the right answer. And maybe even arguing the other side, letting them know ahead of time, okay, let me just take a step back and play devil's advocate for a minute. Argue the other side and see if they still maintain their position. And if they do, great. If they don't, that's fine too. But it's encouraging them to look from multiple perspectives. At this point, they are more attuned to what we as caregivers do than what we say. If we say, don't use drugs, don't drink, don't smoke, and as a caregiver, you're using drugs, drinking, and smoking, you know, what you're saying is probably falling on deaf ears, because they're like, well, you know, what's good for the goose? They're trying to become more independent, which may lead to active rebellion. If they think they should be able to stay out past midnight, they may start breaking curfew. And it's important to discuss what's going on, why they're doing that, what your reasons are. Why is it that I want you here at midnight? What are my reasons for setting this rule for you at your age? And discussing why the rule exists. It may be a rule you're not willing to compromise on, but helping them understand where you're coming from can go a long way. Characteristics of high self-esteem and identity. Youth with high self-esteem and a solid personal identity can handle positive and negative emotions. Through development, the trust and mistrust and autonomy stages, they experienced emotions, and they learned that they could trust their feelings, and they learned that they could manage their feelings. They learned that the feeling isn't going to overwhelm them, which provides them a sense of safety and empowerment. They act independently. When you have a sense of identity, you know what you want. You know what you want to do, or you know what you think you want to do. And if you have high self-esteem, you have confidence that You can try to do it. But if you fail at it, it's not going to mean you're a bad person. But that initiative is important. Assuming responsibility for successes and failures. As we try new things, we're going to succeed, but we're also going to fail sometimes. And people with high self-esteem don't feel crushed, don't feel like they're going to be rejected, don't feel like they're bad people because they failed. They say, "Oop, yeah, I screwed that up. Let me see what I can learn from it." But in order to have a sense of identity as someone who is lovable, someone who belongs, someone who's capable, it's important that the youth recognizes that they're not always going to succeed, but failures don't have any reflection on them as a human being. They can tolerate frustration and failure, kind of goes along with what we've been talking about, and they take pride in personal accomplishments. It's like, hey, I did that. I am really good at this. That starts forming part of my identity. I had a friend who used to ride horses, and that was a huge part of her identity. And she had these ribbons and stuff from these competitions she'd been in. And I'll admit, I know little to nothing about horses, but that was part of who she was. And part of her peer group were the other youth and families that went to these competitions, that engaged in these activities. And she carried that with her. She still carries that with her as an adult. She is still totally into horses, and that's part of her identity. And she says, you know what? This is something I'm good at. And I feel okay. I feel confident in myself saying that, hey, I'm good at this. It doesn't mean you're a good person or a bad person if you're not good at it. It just means I'm good at this. And I recognize that. This person who has high self-esteem and identity rejoices in others' accomplishments. I know who I am. I know what I can do. I know what I'm good at and that I'm lovable. And I am going to celebrate when you have successes and are able to do things and accomplish things that you're good at. It doesn't mean that I am vulnerable. It doesn't mean that I'm threatened in any way. It means we're both growing together. We're both succeeding together. They also recognize that it's okay to not be the center of attention, which is one of those hallmarks of people with anxious attachment, because they fear abandonment. If they're not the center of attention, they fear they're being abandoned. They fear that people don't like them. And if they're not the center of attention, they don't know whether they deserve to breathe the air. They're looking for that external validation, somebody else to tell them, you're okay, you're lovable, you're smart enough, you're good enough. That puts a lot of pressure on other people and leaves the person extremely vulnerable. So the person who's okay letting somebody else take the limelight is a person who tends to have a much higher self-esteem and know who they are. They don't need other people to say, you're all that. They accept and give constructive feedback. They attempt new tasks and challenges when they're presented, and may offer assistance to others. People with high self-esteem are okay. They know that, hey, I'm okay. And I know what I'm good at. I'm going to take a step outside my comfort zone and I'm going to try this. And if I succeed, great. If I don't, that's fine too. It doesn't reflect on who I am as a person. It just gives me more information about what I'm good at and maybe what I like. There's a lot of things I'm good at that I really don't like. And there's a lot of things that I really like that I'm really not good at. But that helps me figure out what I'm going to do. People with low self-esteem need that external validation to avoid fears of abandonment. Failure to develop identity and a sense of competence continue to come back and lead that person to need that external validation. They can't look into their own head and go, you're pretty awesome. You may not be everybody's cup of tea, but you're pretty awesome. Failure to understand self and complementarity is another issue that causes people to need external validation. Complementarity. My husband and I are polar opposites. We're complementary. He is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not impulsive, but, well, I am very rigid. Spontaneous, that's the word I was looking for. We complement each other. He can handle things that come up spontaneously. I just kind of like dissolve. On the other hand, he gets bored when things are too structured, but there are some things that have to be structured. So we recognize each other's strengths and we play off of those so we can be more effective and efficient. When we talk about temperament, extrovert versus introvert refers to how people prefer their environment and their social preferences. Extroverts have a lot of friends. They think and talk at the same time. They love making small talk. They draw energy from other people. Introverts, not so much. They're not antisocial. They are more aware of what's going on inside of themselves. They want to think before they talk. And they tend to want to do deep dives on things. They get really bored really easily with small talk. They want to just do that deep dive. And they often only have a couple of really good friends that they're able to do those deep dives with. One's not better than other. They're just different. Sensing and intuitive is how you conceptualize the world. Sensors tend to be much more detailed and focus on all of the facts and the details and stuff. The intuitive person focuses on the broad strokes and the big picture. This is what I want. And then you give that to the sensing person and say, okay, now make it happen. I come up with the idea. You help me figure out how to operationalize it. Thinking versus feeling. Again, this is not a judgment. Thinkers tend to base their decisions and their motivation on what is right, what is just, what the law is. They tend to like things that are much more concrete. Feelers tend to base their decisions and they're motivated by how other people feel and wanting to make everybody happy. So we make decisions motivated by different things. It doesn't mean one's better, one's worse. It's just different. You have to have feelers and you have to have thinkers. When we put our logic together, we generally come up with a much more robust resolution for things. And then judging and perceiving, time management. You have your spontaneous and your structured. Everybody needs spontaneity. Where would the world be if we didn't have police officers, if we didn't have tow truck drivers, if we didn't have people who would drop things on a moment's notice and just, be there to help you figure things out? Then you have the structured people like me that we love our routines, but you can become too structured or you can become too spontaneous. So we both tend to help each other out. A lack of awareness of personal strengths, talents, and values can thwart our identity. It's important for us to encourage youth and adults alike to regularly assess what are your strengths and your talents and your values. What's important to you right now? What things are worthy of your energy and important in your rich and meaningful life? A sense of lack of acceptance and approval from significant figures like parents, friends, or just in general society can also lead people to feel like they are unlovable, they don't belong, and they don't know who they are. They're like, well, this is kind of who I think I am, but that's not acceptable. So I need to be something else. I don't know what that something else is. We want people to feel comfortable being who they are, however they are. Low self-esteem leads to fears of failure, rejection, isolation, powerlessness, which all equal high anxiety and depression. When you're constantly worried that people are going to reject you, that you're not going to be loved, oh my gosh, how terrifying would that be? Teens are highly vulnerable to emotional reactivity. one of your cognitive distortions is emotional reasoning, and that is making judgments based on how you feel instead of the facts in the situation. But remember, when we're stressed, when that stress response is triggered, we are not engaging our wise mind. We're not engaging our thinking mind. We're acting from an emotional mind. And teens tend to be much more reactive, so they tend to spend much more time in that fight or flight emotional reactivity place. And part of that's due to hormone changes. Part of that may be due to needs for more sleep. They're not getting enough sleep, so their stress response is already triggered, already primed. And sometimes it's a lack of a larger frame of reference. What seems like the end of the world today, because you're 14 and you've only had 14 years of experiences, may not be that big of a deal in the big scheme of things. But don't tell a kid that, when you get to be my age, you won't even think twice about this. How invalidating is that? Right now, my reality, or if I were the child, my reality is that, yeah, this feels like the end of the world. Okay, so help them use the semantics. It feels like the end of the world. Now, what are you going to do? Let's unhook from that feeling. What are you going to do with that feeling? In terms of helping youth build self-esteem and identity, have them define their rich and meaningful life. And what is important and rich and meaningful at 9, 10, 11, 12 is probably going to be very different at 16, 17, 18. That's okay. What's important in your rich and meaningful life at 24 is likely not the same when you're 64. We evolve in what's important in our rich and meaningful life, but getting them started so they at least have some conceptualization. They're forcing themselves to think about what is important to me and what do I stand for. Make sure they're set up for success by teaching them how to set SMART goals. If they start setting all these goals and they never achieve them, they may not feel capable. They may not feel empowered. My son is a writer, and he has difficulty writing his books and finally getting them out for publication. And I encourage him to set small goals. What are you going to get written today? And set up your goals so you have a tentative deadline for when you're going to be releasing that draft. That way, it's not, I'm writing now and I'm going to write, and then maybe in 6 months I'll do something. You have small goals that you can check off and feel a sense of accomplishment and success. Encourage youth to write about their strengths, good traits, achievements, and successes. They may not want to share these, and that's okay. We as caregivers are going to point them out, and at least my kids usually rolled their eyes. They're like, oh, ma. But it's okay. Encourage them to acknowledge that the good things, because it's so easy to focus on the failures. We want to help them also notice what their strengths are. Positive self-talk doesn't help if it falls on deaf ears. Encouraging somebody to look in the mirror and say, I'm all that in a bag of chips. It is a pointless exercise for most people if they don't believe it. If they believe it, if they're looking in there going, hey, I've got this, and they believe it, that's one thing. But if they are just having words come out of their mouth, no matter how many times they say it, a lot of times they're just not going to believe it. Help them develop a balanced core set of beliefs, build body and self-acceptance, and build boundaries and assertiveness. Remember those boundaries in each piece of life: physical boundaries, interpersonal boundaries, how quickly I get into relationships, who I'm in a relationship with, what I think is okay in relationships. Emotional and cognitive boundaries, how I feel and what I think. And then those environmental boundaries. That's my stuff. Don't take my sweater. Don't read my diary. Don't let yourself into my house without permission. Whatever, we're talking about here, environmental boundaries, but helping people learn what their boundaries are and how to assertively communicate them. These are my thoughts. How can I communicate my thoughts to you in a way that is authentic to me, but not overwhelming or aggressive to you? How can I put my cards on the table without creating a situation where the other person feels judged or vulnerable in some way? Encourage them and practice with them how to respond assertively to criticism. And this is a big one. We can't respond to criticism when we're adults with, well, I'm rubber and you're glue. What you say bounces off me and sticks to you. That's what we used to say on the playground back, in my day. But you can't do that when you're 24 years old or even 14. So how do they respond to criticism, if at all? Especially with social media, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of criticism. There's a lot of stuff that you can honestly look at and go, you know what? Not worth my time and effort. Just not. Going to let it go. Because I'm, as my son says, Mom, don't feed the trolls. I'm not going to feed the trolls. It's not worth my energy. But sometimes we get criticism. Sometimes it's constructive. Sometimes it's not. If it's not constructive, but we feel we need to address it, we need to help people learn how to say, I hear you disagree, or I hear your point on this. However, that felt very hurtful the way you said it. Or acknowledge, thank you for pointing that out. You're right. I could stand to improve my skills in this area, and I will try to do better. Period. End of story. Recognizing that most of the time criticism is about something you do or something you did, not who you are. Other causes of stress, poor time management. Oh my gosh, youth in high school these days have so many demands on their time and so much homework. Oh my gosh, I thought I had a lot of homework. Pales in comparison. Helping youth figure out how to manage their time so they have a well-rounded life. Managing peer pressure. That's tough for anybody at any age, but especially in this period when they're trying to figure out who they are and trying to figure out what it means to have self-esteem, can feel very vulnerable. Parental expectations or perceived expectations. If your kid thinks that you will only be happy with them if they go to college and then to grad school and then follow in your steps, maybe that's not what they want to do. So they may be stressed or fearful of letting you down. It's really important to regularly talk with them about what their wants are, what their hopes and dreams are. And maybe if I have dreams or if I have thoughts about what my kids might enjoy or be good at in the future. I know when we did career planning, we went through a bunch of things, but it was important for me to say, what I want for you most is for you to be happy. So you may not choose what I think would make you happy, but what I think would make you happy doesn't really matter. What matters is what makes you happy. And we had to have that discussion multiple times as different things came up. And not assuming our children know that we love them, whatever they do, is really important. Making sure that they understand that even if they don't take the path that we hoped they would take, all right, we love them anyway, and we want for them nothing more than to be happy. Children struggle with, what am I going to do with my life? Parental expectations aside, it's a lot of pressure to pick a major and figure out what you're going to do. Most youth will experience some traumatic events and losses, from friends moving away to deaths to natural disasters. There's a lot of stuff. And remember, a child has many fewer resources to deal with that, to interpret it, to understand it, and to regain a sense of safety and empowerment. As caregivers, we need to make sure that we are responding to them when they experience these events and losses that they may perceive as traumatic, even if we don't think so, in order to help them manage those feelings and regain that sense of personal power. They're going to have romantic relationships. They're going to get their heart broken. It happens. And it's a huge cause of stress. Being empathetic is so important during this time in order to help them, again, identify what's important in life. And this romantic relationship, you really wanted it to work out. What does that mean, if anything, about you? How does this change what you want as a person, what you want out of relationships? And that's where we can start helping them develop their relationship identity. What is it that I think my relationships need to look like? And a failure to achieve something. Some youth feel, even at this age, like if they haven't achieved something, if they haven't gotten an award, if they haven't made a team, if they haven't done whatever, that they are not useful. And it's important that we help them recognize that they are lovable for who they are and figure out who they are. And I always think of the movie It's a Wonderful Life. The main character in A Wonderful Life touched so many people's lives and didn't even really realize it until, at the end of the movie. But just because you haven't gotten an award doesn't mean you haven't achieved something. So we want to help people recognize that. In terms of parenting and reparenting, as far as being a parent, I insisted on respect and show respect. I will show respect to my children, and I insist that they show respect to me. Assertiveness, boundaries. As a parent, we need to be direct and assertive, but not confrontational. Sitting youth down and saying, I've got a problem with this. Let's talk about it. Avoid invalidating or minimizing feelings with phrases like, well, let me tell you, when I was a kid, you think you've got it bad. Or compared to other people, you've got it made. In the big scheme of things, this won't matter in 6 months. Well, maybe that's true, but right now, it hurts like hell. Thank you very much. So let's focus on the moment. You can try the miracle question with older youth in this age group. If this problem went away tomorrow, what would be different? Help them identify their peace, needs, and wants. Physically, what do you need right now? Interpersonally, what do you need in your relationships? Emotionally, mentally, and environmentally, what do you need right now to feel safe, empowered, fulfilled? Address thinking errors with feel. FitCat, the facts in this context at this time. Explanations, alternate ones. Exceptions to what you're assuming is going on. And likelihood, or what is the probability that the worst case scenario is going to happen. With all or none thinking, encourage youth to consider what's the middle path. It's you love me or you hate me. All right, well, what's the middle? Maybe I love you and I really dislike some of your behaviors. That's a middle path. Overgeneralization, encourage them to look for exceptions. Very rarely does anything happen all the time or never. Mindlessness, encourage children and everybody to stay focused in the present. All right, I hear you're worried about what could happen next week and you resent what happened last month. What's going on right now in this particular situation? In terms of addressing pessimism, help the youth embrace the good with the bad. I don't like taking tests, but I want to be a doctor, and therefore, in order to get into college, I have to study and pass this test. It's just what it is. Hardiness means focusing on the big picture, all the things that are important in my rich and meaningful life, which ones are going well, and which ones could use a little work. For mind reading, making sure that they are looking at the facts in context at this time, and making sure that what they are assuming is based in fact, not just what they think somebody is thinking or wanting. Model and encourage self-compassion and address negative beliefs about compassion. Sometimes people will think that having compassion for yourself or for others means that they are needy or you are needy. And that's not true. I mean, in that moment, you may need some compassion, but compassion is recognizing that people have a heart. Some people are resistant to compassion because they're afraid of feeling sad or grieving. I don't want to have compassion because then I might start feeling something. Or they may fear that giving up self-criticism makes them lazy, weak, or unlovable. There may be other messages that keep people from embracing compassion, but we need to be sensitive to the fact that compassion, especially self-compassion, is really difficult for a lot of people, especially for those that were raised in critical environments. Adolescents still lack the experiences and frame of reference of adults. Their physical and hormonal development can make them especially vulnerable to high emotionality. Improving self-esteem means improving self-acceptance and awareness, i.e., identity, and self-efficacy in improving their belief that they can handle tasks and emotions. Adolescents are still exploring roles and values and need to be encouraged to examine their personal belief systems on a regular basis. Adolescents who continue to strive for external validation and fear abandonment will continuously maintain high levels of stress, frequently feel helpless and powerless, and may develop alternate ways of surviving these fears, the surviving fears of rejection and isolation. They may become antisocial, they may engage in addictive behaviors, or they may submit and engage in unquestioning compliance to peer pressure. Adults who had difficulty navigating adolescence often benefit from self-esteem work, identifying and addressing automatic thoughts, including the inner critic, development of mindfulness. What is it that I need right now? Again, exploration of compassion and identification and resolution of losses from childhood, which may manifest in adulthood as resentments. Happiness and recovery is entirely possible. All teens will go through phases of dysphoria, and as caregivers, we need to help them process this. We need to help them identify what is important and what is meaningful to them and what the possible solutions are. The key is to learn to identify goals and values, what makes you a good person, and which behaviors and thoughts get you closer to being the person you want to be and having the life you want to have. Are there any questions? Alrighty, everybody. Well, thank you so much for coming today. And I look forward to seeing you next week when we're going to talk about developing intimacy and relationships.